establishing the rapport, especially with the sales leadership team, treating your sales leaders as business partners, and make sure they know, not that you're going to necessarily agree all the time, but that they have a voice and you are going to be collaborative with them.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
It's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Jennings Executive Search. I had a great conversation with John Jennings about the skills needed in different pricing roles. He and I think a lot alike. If you're looking for a new pricing role, or if you're trying to hire just the right pricing person, I strongly suggest you reach out to Jennings Executive Search. They specialize in placing pricing people. Say that 3 times fast. Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the collaborative relationship between them so your company can win more business at higher prices. I'm Mark Stiving, and our guest today is Ann Warren. Here are 3 things you want to know about Ann before we start. She is the Senior Director of Global Pricing at Shure, the only microphone I ever use. She started out as an accountant and an auditor. I'm not sure I could think of a more boring job, but she'll convince me otherwise. And she's been leading pricing teams for about 20 years. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you.
Okay, how did you get into pricing?
I got into pricing approximately 5 or 6 years after I left audit. I typically had been in roles, kind of liaison roles, so bridging the gap between either engineering, finance department, or marketing and the finance department. So I was actually recruited within Ameritech. It was Ameritech at the time, now AT&T, and I was asked to move into a pricing manager role. So that's how I started.
So you were just invited to it. You didn't, it wasn't a project. It wasn't anything. It's just like, okay, I'll try it.
Exactly. And I really grew to love it. I love numbers, but more importantly, I like the interface between diverse groups, diverse functions within a company.
So isn't it funny? One of the things you just said, you love numbers and you come from accounting and audit. So of course you do. But isn't it funny that most people think pricing is a number, and then once you get into it, you realize it isn't?
Absolutely. I think of pricing as both an art and a science, and there's a tremendous amount of psychology involved in pricing. And I think people don't necessarily think about that.
Yes, and so that's outside the world, right? So when we talk about behavioral economics and how our customers make decisions and all the psychological aspects, but what we're going to talk about today is the psychology inside our company, because this is maybe harder because everybody has an opinion and thinks their opinion matter. I'm sorry, their opinion does matter. My apologies for saying that. So what high-level thoughts on collaborating with your peers are we going to start with?
Well, I think it's important to take yourself outside of your role as a pricing person or as a finance person and really think and learn, most importantly, about what are the other person's goals, right? Okay, salespeople, what are their goals? What are some things that may make them nervous in terms of being able to achieve their goals? And certainly pricing is one of those hot buttons that really makes it very, very challenging for pricing and finance people to interface effectively with sales teams in particular.
Okay, I couldn't agree more, but let's start with finance people for a second. I actually like finance people from the perspective of they want higher margins, so they want higher prices. So they're with me, right? They're on my team of trying to get prices up. I love that. But what I don't like about finance people is when they do pricing, they only know cost. They don't know value.
Absolutely. And I feel very strongly that it's the pricing person's role to be that connector between finance, marketing, and sales. So one of the initiatives that I am working on is how do we go to market with new products? How do we, let's say, take product management and the finance view and the sales perspective and the customer perspective and weave those all together so that we can collect more, right? And make finance happy. We could collect more on every unit of sale, but we really are looking at what do the customers value, and can we somehow tie a number to that? Like, what's it worth? And keep it simple, right? Like, all right, we can be 10% higher than our competition because this is more valuable. You know, it could be time savings for a customer or something else that they would value.
So how did you learn that you had to be collaborative across these different departments?
A great question. And I think, as I mentioned to you before we started the podcast, I began my career in audit and multiple clients, 22 years old, probably had 20 or 30 clients in my first year, and really to establish rapport and find common ground. So what is it about the salesperson's point of view? Maybe we do have things in common. Certainly pricing and finance people do, but you're right. Sometimes finance teams, they're very focused on costs, not as much value. And there's also challenges in terms of bridging that gap between how a salesperson communicates versus a finance person. And so I feel, again, in a pricing role, you're really that connector.
Yeah, so pricing and sales is probably the most challenging of all of the different collaborations, I think, because salespeople, they're trying to represent their clients, their customers. They're trying to say, hey, my customer needs a better price. And so they're trying to negotiate inside our company to get their customer a better price. And so oftentimes we think, hey, you should be representing us, not the customer, but their job is to represent both.
Right.
To the best of their ability. How do you handle that? How do you work with salespeople?
Well, I think establishing that empathy for, boy, if I was having that conversation with a client or a customer, how would I want to approach that? And I think it's all about knowledge is empowerment. So what I found is, as an example, if we have to do a price increase, right? Or we should do a price increase, empowering the salespeople to have some voice in the process. So as an example, if we have a certain product that's really competitive, maybe we shouldn't increase that particular price, but we have a whole host of other products where we can do that, and give them some, I call it a script, give them a few bullet points of, hey, here's what I would say. If I were having the discussion with the customer, I've also personally offered to go, and I have done this, have the conversation with the customer and give sales the confidence that they need. If they're confident, often they will come up with a better script for their customer than I would. I'm just planting the seed. And I found that to be really effective. And, it's helped me establish personal credibility within companies.
Yeah, so first off, being willing to go out and talk to customers and say, hey, we're going to raise your prices and be the bad guy for the salesperson.
Absolutely.
I think that's a huge win. I've loved the fact that you said, here's a script. Now, I have blogged probably 3, 4, or 5 times on how to raise prices. And I typically give people, here's the 4 things you want to put in the email that you're going to send out to your customers. I want to know what's in your script.
Well, it will really depend. To your earlier point about just being so cost focused, you have to be a little bit careful with that one. Certainly in this environment, I think it's perfectly acceptable to highlight that and will definitely be accepted by most customers. But I do feel as if bringing in a script around value. So for example, if you have a company where your customer service is sort of stellar, and it's stellar relative to cheaper alternatives. in order for us to continue to offer, live live support or what have you, it loosely, right, relates back to cost, because if you don't raise your prices, ultimately it's going to come back to bite you. But certainly including those things, being transparent, don't try to hide, don't try to be mysterious, be honest with your customers. And I think that will definitely go a long way. And the letters that go out are fine, but I think a live discussion with between the salesperson and their customer works wonders as well.
Oh, I think it's way better. When I was talking about the letters, I'm really referring to Netflix just sent me the price increase letter, right? So what was that one like? So I'm going to give everybody in here my 4 tips, and you can tell me if you use these or don't use these.
Sure.
But my 4 tips I always say when you're going to send out one of these letters is, number 1, we blame costs, right? It's really the only reason people accept for price increase. They don't want you to say, hey, we want more profit. So we just say, hey, our costs are going up. We don't really have a choice. Number 2, we try to do something nice for our customers if it's recurring revenue. So we'll hold your price constant for 6 months and then we'll bring it up. Number 3, we talk about all the value we've been delivering and haven't yet charged you for. And so isn't that wonderful that we're delivering so much more? And then number 4 is, if it's true, we haven't raised prices for 3 years. We've been holding your price constant.
Definitely.
So those are my 4 points that I always write in a price increase letter. Are they part of your script?
Definitely. I think you nailed it. You want to keep it simple, short and to the point, but at the same time, people, they don't want to feel like they're gouged. And again, just going back to, I like the fact that certain companies, they've really had to get out of their comfort zone because of the current environment. However, as a normal course of business, raising prices shouldn't be this big, intimidating, initiative. Certainly, we expect our salaries to increase every year. We know as consumer shopping, there's more air in that potato chip bag. So I think I think just getting more and more conversation and just making it as part of everyday conversations, just like financials are reviewed and people go through, well, how are you doing your expenses relative to your budget? We should be having more conversation about just pricing and the power of that profit lever.
Yeah, and I think what you're implying there, which I don't think you stated directly, was if we could get customers to just expect an annual price increase, then it makes the conversation so much easier than once every 10 years, hey, we're going to raise your prices.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Without
and in
question.
fact, I think Netflix is doing that now. They're training us to get that annual price increase.
Oh,
So,
that is a definite. That is it. Well, it's funny because I won't name the gym that I belong to because there's so many, but I am constantly baffled based on what I pay, and I paid the same price forever, but I go in and the microphones aren't working, or the caliber of instructors has depleted, and I'm just thinking, if only you'd raise everybody's subscription 50 cents. It's not even $1, 50 cents a month. You could get a new microphone. Of course, I think about microphones of where I work, but that's just one example. And I feel very strongly that it shouldn't be such an intimidating initiative.
No, it really shouldn't. Absolutely. Okay, so we talked a little bit about finance. We've talked quite a bit about sales. Tell me about marketing and or product management. How do you work with, what's important to work with when you're working with those two departments?
Well, I think it goes back to the same basic tenets, and that is you want them to feel good about their product. You want to help call out that value proposition, maybe in more, less technical terms if it's a technical product, and more about the value prop to the end user customer or B2B customer. What's in it for them? and how can we monetize that? And then help bridge the gap to get the salespeople confident. And that's tough with the timing, because sometimes a product's being developed and we won't actually see the product for 3, 4, 5 years. But at the same time, you're helping, again, bridge that gap between what the product can technically do, if it's, a manufactured type product,
Yep.
and the actual benefits that it brings, and then customers' willingness to pay. So again, it's kind of bridging that gap.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because it feels to me like value, other than finance, value is the single thing that holds all of these departments together, or at least it should be.
Mhm.
And so let's just talk about marketing for a second. I would have thought that marketing knows better than pricing what the value propositions are, what the value of the product is. Because we as pricing people, we have to manage, hundreds, thousands of products, where marketing has a much smaller subset, and they should understand their market segment better.
I agree. And I think generally speaking, most marketers do. I think though, having that pricing person, because we're not as close, we might ask what are deemed stupid, stupid questions. I'll always say, pardon my lack of knowledge in this area, but can you tell me, why would I buy, like, who's the target customer and why would I buy this? And usually based on the response, it's really just a tweak to bring it into dollars versus words. So, and again, I'll say one of my expressions is never underestimate the power of a confident salesperson.
Oh gosh, yes.
Getting the salespeople excited and watching, the product managers bring something to life and creating that collaboration is really, really, for me personally, is a great feeling.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. I'm just trying to explore where people fall short on this, right? Because to you and I, it seems so obvious that we should be out
Right.
selling value and marketing value, and yet
Right.
people don't see it the way we do. And why not?
Right. I don't think that it's intentional. I don't think people are intentionally doing anything to say, oh, I don't want to work with this person or that person. I think it comes down to just being so ingrained in the details, and it's very easy to get pulled into, well, we have to develop this product, and there's so many technical issues. If you ever sit in on a call, like a technical call, which I do once in a while, just to bring myself a little bit up to speed, and immediately I'm completely overwhelmed for 2 reasons. One is it's not my core competency, and 2 is just the amount of details that are included. So it's very easy to get, I don't want to say myopic, but maybe a little bit, just, I've got to get this done, I've got to get that done. And the communication to your partners is secondary, and it should not be. So that's why these roles of pricing and other project managers and other liaison positions, I feel, are so important to say, wait a minute, what do the salespeople think? Or what does legal think about this? Sometimes those get missed too. So I think just being a generalist is super beneficial to the whole process.
I agree completely. When we're talking, so I was talking about marketing people, and you brought it back to product, which I'm going to do in just a second.
Mhm.
And when we're talking about marketing people, though, I think that if we could teach them to think about value constantly, then when they're out talking to customers, or someone says, oh, I had this problem and your product helped me solve it, it's like, ding, 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 got it. There's a value statement for me.
Right.
How can I
Right.
share that with sales? How can I share that with put that on our webpage, or whatever it happens to be, right? Or validate it and say, to a lot of people have this problem.
Yeah, definitely. I would say to that, to the extent that you have, there's multiple different ways, right, to design a marketing organization. But what I've learned over my career is that the most effective organizations tend to have sort of these liaison roles with sales, and they might be aligned by, let's say, target market, which could be geographic or a specific audience, and they get really refined, again, tweaking the technical side and turning it into a value prop. So you're absolutely right. Product management, marketing, sometimes, I've even seen it where the roles are one and the same. Probably not the most effective situation. Although depending on how technical your product is and how technical your audience is, that could work as well. Because really technical people value things that, other people may not.
Yeah.
So
So now I want to take a step back into product management. And I used to teach product managers, so I understand their world really, really well. And the problem that I think they have is they're too far removed from value. What does value mean to the customer? And my argument would be, why are you building a product if it doesn't have value to the customer?
right. And the answer shouldn't be because I can, because
Or I was
technically,
told to, or
right, exactly. And I will say sometimes too, I think products may start off with really good intentions and be, connected to the value, but then technical things may happen, things may go wrong, and then over time, oh boy, that value prop we thought we had, or competitor comes in, that happens too. But I think, again, making sure that there's a structure, an infrastructure that can really support that constant feedback loop. Okay, well, let's remember, why are we selling this and who's going to buy it and why are they buying it? Very simple, basic questions. And I try to break it down, again, depending on the audience. What is it that they're looking for? Are they looking for something that will generate revenue for them or save them time, which saves them expense? It doesn't need to be overly complicated. There's only a few things on the P&L. Try tying it back from the customer's P&L point of view, or if it's an end user, obviously there's other interests there. I'm more with B2B expertise.
right. And in my view of the world, if we're in B2B, and especially if we have a direct salesperson selling B2B products, you should always be able to tie that back to profitability to the customer. Always.
Always. I did look at, these like software as a service. People are saying, oh, it's different. It is different, but at the same time, there's a lot of commonality, and it goes back to, all right, well, what will this software do that today you have human beings performing these functions, right? And now, if you program the software correctly, you will not have to have these 3 headcount performing this function. So that goes back to your P&L. Of course, you're paying for this software, you're paying a monthly fee or annual fee or whatever. And so I think, again, just trying to boil it down to the basics. I can't reinforce that point enough.
Yep. So Ann, this has been a lot of fun. I'm going to ask you your last question.
Okay.
What is the one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
I think it's going back to, I know it sounds really simple, but establishing the rapport, especially with the sales leadership team, treating your sales leaders as business partners, right? And make sure they know, not that you're going to necessarily agree all the time, but that they have a voice, right? And you are going to be collaborative with them. So if you're starting a new job as a pricing professional, that is absolutely the number one. Of course, I feel strongly you also, need a good relationship with finance, but the sales teams in particular, if you have good rapport with them, you're going to make huge inroads and be very successful as a pricing professional.
Okay, so how do you build that rapport?
I think it's pretty simple. When you start, and I can tell you, I've worked some places where I've been welcomed with open arms, other places, very suspicious. Why do we have a pricing person here? I think you try to be as natural as you can be, as open and transparent. What is your role? Your role is to be a partner. That is the first message you should deliver to establish that rapport, and mean it. And if you see interesting articles, as you peruse LinkedIn, share that with the salespeople. Listen to them, be an open door. If they're talking about competitive threat, okay, well, maybe we need to have, not that we like to discount prices, but we might need to have a promotion or a special bundle that the competitors can't meet. So be that partner and establish that early on in the relationship. That's the best thing you can do. That will give you firepower for initiatives that you want to perform later on.
I couldn't agree more. I was actually coaching a client this morning, and I'd said to her, when you have this meeting, I would go in with the attitude that says, how can I help you be successful? Right?
Definitely.
And this was just an internal collaborator. We'll put it that way.
Right. Well, one of my other favorite expressions is I find the internal marketplace far more dangerous than the external every time as a pricing person. So if you remember that, you'll do well.
Nice. And thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
Through LinkedIn.
All right. So we'll have the LinkedIn link for your page. What do they call it? For your page, I guess. Your profile. There we go. Thank you for your profile on our show notes. Episode 162 is all done. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? And speaking of reviews, Don said about my new book, Win, Keep, Grow, How to Price and Package to Accelerate Your Subscription Business. He said, this book explains in easy to understand terms a no-nonsense pricing model that I should have been using from the very beginning of my business. As I'm listening to the audiobook version, I'm completely rethinking my business strategy, and I'm excited to implement the changes. Thank you, Don. The check's in the mail. Finally, if you have any questions or comments about the podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact. Thanks again to Jennings Executive Search for sponsoring our podcast. If you're looking to hire someone in pricing, I suggest you contact someone who knows pricing people. Contact Jennings Executive Search.